You smell that, Taplines listener? Of course you don't. That's not how podcasts work. But if it was, you might detect the herbaceous scent of a Negroni or the seductive aroma of a well-made martini wafting through your speakers, because today I'm joined by Tim McCurdy, VinePair managing editor and host of the absolutely must-listen Cocktail College podcast. Now I know what you're thinking. This is a beer show. What the hell is Dave doing giving precious episodes away to some tipple jockey? Or maybe you're not thinking that. Honestly, I hope you're not. That would be kind of weird. Plus, our man McCurdy is doing us a large format favor. I tapped him for his Taplines debut because we're going to be talking about some extremely recent history on this episode, and I needed his ace interviewing skills and broad beverage alcohol industry wisdom to help me tell the tale the way it demands. It's a hell of a tale, by the way. As you may have heard, one of the world's biggest cannabis companies, Tilray, just acquired a bunch of craft breweries and brands from the world's biggest macro brewer, Anheuser-Busch InBev. It's an $85 million deal with bold, potentially bizarre implications for both firms, plus the American craft brewing industry writ large. In other words, it's exactly the sort of story we love sniffing out here at Taplines. So today, Tim and I are going to flip the script, turn the tables, and talk about a piece of beer industry history in the making. It's Cocktail College's Tim McCurdy. It's the Tilray ABI craft brewing shakeup. It's the answer to the question, who the hell in their right mind would pay good legal tender for Shock Top in 2023? And it's all right here, right now, on VinePair's Taplines. Yes. It's our man, Tim McCurdy, joining the Taplines podcast. Tim, we are honored to be in the presence of what some may say, people are talking, Scotsman of the Year, managing editor of the year. A lot of accolades that people are already including you in the running for. But of course, today you're the Taplines guest of the episode, and that's the most important one. Tim, welcome to the show.
Dave, thank you very much for having me. It's always great when you get to use the phrase long-time listener, first-time caller. And indeed, it is true today.
We've got listeners, Taplines listeners already know that we are about to dive into a crossover episode for the ages, but we are figuring out the format. We're flying, by the seat of our pants, our well-tailored slacks. Tim and I are going to put on a show for you. Of course, that's what we do here on Taplines. That's what Tim does for all those tipple enthusiasts over at Cocktail College. But this show is going to be a little bit of improv, right, Tim?
Yeah, we're figuring it out. We're feeling it out as we go here, but I like that. And you know what I like about today's episode, Dave? Other than I'm going to have to listen to my own voice when this comes out. No, that's not going to happen. But what I like about today is we're turning the tables. You are, of course, always an expert in this field. You lead these incredible interviews on Taplines, but we're turning the camera to you, buddy. I mean, it's always on you, but we're turning it to you today because, look, I'm a beer drinker. I'm a beer enthusiast, and I do cover the beverage alcohol space myself too, but I'm not an expert like yourself when it comes to up-to-date deals, mergers, acquisitions, all of the above, fun things like that. So we're turning the spotlight to you today to talk about some pretty interesting recent developments.
We're talking about business. That's right. We've got the business brains on. We've got our deal-making caps on. Tim is joining us today, like he said, to take over the helm. We're handing over the reins. I'm going to put myself in the Taplines guest position. Very unusual. We're going to have to adapt. We're going to have to overcome. And yeah, like you said, Tim, we've got a lot of developments going on in the American beer industry. I mean, we always do. It's been a really intense cycle for the beer industry, especially over the course of the past 18 months as the economy has kind of recovered and gone in weird new directions post-pandemic. But more recently, the reason we've got you on today is to talk about something that just broke last week. The acquisition of 8 different brands, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 Anheuser-Busch InBev brands that the world's biggest macro brewer is selling to one of the world's biggest cannabis companies, the company based out of Ontario known as, I think Ontario, out of Canada, certainly, known as Tilray Brands. That deal was announced last Monday. If you'll be listening to this on Tuesday, so just over 8 days ago, or just around 8 days ago. Yeah, there's a deal, going to be a deal for a bunch of Anheuser-Busch InBev's brands, ABI, that Tilray is going to scoop up and do something with. We know
Mhm.
it's going to be something. It's not going to be nothing. You don't spend $85 million on something to do nothing with it. Of course, that was the price of those 8 brands. But we
Unless
don't.
you're Elon Musk, but that's a lot more
Yeah,
than
then you
$85 million.
right. Then you spend $44 billion on something you loved just to turn it into something that everyone hates. Thanks a lot, Elon Musk. Come on the show. We'd love to have you. Um, but yeah, so that's the that's where I think it's a good. And this is your show. You're in control. But that's where I think it's a good place to start. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I'm thinking that too. It feels like, and again, maybe we're going to get into this, but it feels like maybe we're making up for lost time here. You said, eight in one, this deal. We're talking about this acquisition. And, it feels like acquisitions have cooled off in recent years in craft beer, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But first of all, I'm here wondering, what the hell is Tilray? I mean, you said that there's a cannabis company, but what's a
Right.
Canadian cannabis company doing getting to the business of American craft beer in 2023?
Tilray is, like I said, one of the biggest cannabis firms in the world. It is a large conglomerate of dozens of different brands that it operates, in its home market of Canada. Then in the U.S., where marijuana is legal, it has a medical cannabis business that it's producing product for hospitals and private practice that are writing scripts on that, and of course, for people who are producing medical products using THC, which is the active component in cannabis. So Tilray is this company. It used to be known as Aphria, APHRIA. I think it was a different company name, but it's been in the game for quite some time, and its business is basically roll ups, right? So it is slowly but surely acquiring companies and brands in cannabis, with the hopes of federal legalization in the United States coming along, which is what a lot of cannabis firms are kind of staking their futures on, is legalization coming along and opening up this market, this highly lucrative market where a lot of people want to use cannabis products and have a bunch of discretionary income, as compared certainly to sort of less mature markets. And Tilray like them, is hoping for the opportunity to do that in the future. The alcohol piece of the puzzle for Tilray is a relatively new development, though, Tim. So,
Mhm.
only about 3 years ago, Tilray acquired a craft brewery that's based out of Atlanta, called Sweetwater. Sweetwater, you may be familiar with. Um,
420, is that the
yeah,
one?
exactly. 420. Yeah, like we'll make for those of you enjoying this as a listening experience, we're gonna make some sound effects. Maybe we'll have to fix them up in post. But like, oh yeah, 420 pale ale. I think it's an IPA. I don't know, man. But yes, the weed reference, obviously,
So that seems like a kind of natural,
yeah,
or
there's a
it seems like a
a
good fit there.
synergy there, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think what the weed reference might have sweetened the deal when Afria
Right.
slash Tilray, yeah, hey, was looking at Sweetwater. But I think what really attracted them to Sweetwater was this idea, that they can get into the American craft beer business and learn more about how American drinkers are shopping for craft style beverages, how that marketing works, how dealing with American regulators, works, developing that musculature to be more, ready to go, if and when that go ahead, that say so from Uncle Sam comes down and opens the floodgates federally on marijuana legalization. So that was, it seemed, the thesis behind its acquisition, Tilray's
Mhm.
acquisition of Sweetwater. But more recently, in the intervening few years, Tilray has kind of slowly but steadily built up a not insignificant position in the American craft beer business, right as the business itself is starting to flatten out and slow down, and there's not a whole lot of growth to be had in craft beer right now. Which Taplines listeners who mostly come here from the history of beer may or may not know, but the current state of the craft brewing industry, like the beer industry more broadly, is one of flat to slightly down growth. So you don't see normally a ton of that type of sort of bullish moves into the space, and yet Tilray, would go on to acquire Green Flash and Alpine out in California. They acquired Red Truck Brewery, the facility, although I don't think they still market the brand, which is out of Fort Collins, Colorado. And then they acquired Montauk Brewing Company, based on Long Island, late in 2022. So they're starting to build up this position, right? And you start to see maybe the contours of a strategy here coming into focus.
So I've got a quick follow-up question on that one, because it sounds like, and I might be wrong, one of the areas of my knowledge that's weak is ownership of brands, and which larger corporation or conglomerate owns a certain brand. From the way you were describing that there, it sounds like those prior acquisitions have been Tilray kind of scooping up craft producers, whereas the deal that we're talking about today is, yes, Tilray acquiring craft brands, but from a large corporation. Is that a new development for this, for this chapter of Tilray's kind of taking more steps into the beer industry?
I think it's a new development for Tilray, or I know it's a new development for Tilray. They have not made this type of big one fell swoop purchase before from ABI or any other firm, at least as it pertains to the American beer business. But I think it's a new thing for American craft beer. We've certainly seen, sort of roll up behavior over the course of the past 5 years or so. You'll see a private equity operator or a large regional craft brewer go out and acquire smaller craft breweries or put together a bunch of craft breweries in order to strengthen their purchasing power, to find, since we have our business brains on, those sweet synergies to optimize and ideally grow the business overall, right? So we've seen that type of behavior in this market so far, and there's a bunch of examples. For example, Victory and Southern Tier, formed artisanal brewing ventures. Canarchy Collective, before it was acquired by Monster Beverage Corporation in early 2021. There's been a lot of acquisitions. No, early 2022 was a roll up by a private equity firm, I believe Fireman Capital, that then sold it to someone else, and then it got sold to Monster. So we're seeing that type of move, and that's typical, as you would expect from a maturing industry where there are 9,700 breweries, and there's sort of everyone's going after a slice of a pie that is slowly sort of shrinking, maybe too strong a word, but right now it is not. It's contracting a little bit. It's not growing. So you see businesses go out and try to find more leverage to get better pricing, more favorable pricing on inputs, better marketing muscle, et cetera, et cetera. What we haven't seen, and what this is really different, is that purchase from one big player to another big player. Anheuser-Busch and Tilray are not the same size business, not by a long shot. Tilray's market capitalization is probably like, I don't know, 80 times less than Anheuser-Busch's. So we're not talking about, peers necessarily, but we are talking about one vice conglomerate, if we want to call it that. I don't, they're a diversified vice, or they're diversifying vice conglomerate, buying a suite of brands from another. That type of B2B deal at this level really is not something we've seen before in American craft brewing. And I think that opens up kind of a new chapter for a bunch of reasons. The biggest is that ABI is clearly signaling, or I believe clearly signaling with this, that everything is for sale in its portfolio when it comes to craft brewing. I don't see Certainly the company says that they're committed to the breweries that remain in their portfolio. I think it's 11 or so. I just don't see evidence for that based on
Hmm.
all of their their recent track record of stewarding those brands. So we may see more fire sales to come, whether it's from ABI. Molson Coors has a stable of craft breweries. Constellation, of course, did, and they're kind of getting out of the business. But
Hmm.
so I think that's a paradigm shift that I think we may see play out more as these firms look to rationalize their craft brewing footprint because that segment is slowing up.
So before we get into the details, maybe break apart brewery by brewery or brand by brand, or some that stand out to you. I guess just on a macro level again here, does that therefore mean that this is more significant in terms of from the point of view of ABI selling these? Like, is that a bit more significant part of the story, or is Tilray buying them in one swoop? Do you know what I mean? Or is it six and one and half a dozen of the other?
That is a perceptive question, my dear Scott. I think for the purposes of our conversation here, because Taplines is a beer podcast and a beer history podcast, and we've talked before with John Laffler, for example, listeners, you may remember his episode about Goose Island's acquisition in 2011 and how Anheuser-Busch sort of signaled that it was going to push hard into the craft brewing space. For the purposes of our conversation and through this lens, I think that it's at the very least an equal story that ABI appears to be, sort of making its moves to shed its craft assets that it believes are underperforming. I think that's at least equivalent in scope and significance to the beer, the beer audience that's probably listening right now,
Yeah.
than to the fact that Tilray is buying its way in. I think you have to look at ABI's moves over the past, what is it, 12 years since 2011 when they bought Goose Island. You have to look at that as at the a mixed bag. At least you more maybe cynically might say that that's just a failed experiment. I don't, they never really got the craft brewing division firing on all cylinders. There's sort of like grand ideas for how they were going to transform the segment. They were going to steward the segment into its new future. Their powerful distribution network was going to be able to bring all of these fantastic beers from their entire network of craft breweries all across the country and all across the world. Some of that happened. They made a good show of it. They invested in a bunch of breweries, of course, because they bought them all. And then also like kind of these ancillary businesses that looked like they were craft adjacent and looked like it was a real commitment to the space. I think, I'm talking, of course, about like they acquired ratebeer.com. They acquired Northern Brewer, which was a big home brewing supply company. They acquired, or they launched a fucking joint venture with Condé Nast called October, which was a publication. Some of our audience may remember reading. Some of them may have even written for him.
Yeah.
It was a beer publication. So ABI, and that was through ZX Ventures, which is like their little incubator thing. But for all intents and purposes, like ABI is making these moves to sort of align itself or a portion of its business with the craft brewing industry because it sees an opportunity for a lot of growth. At that time, people are talking about 20% of the beer market by 2020 is what craft is gonna hold. It would never get there, but that was it was a very bullish moment. It was very frothy, and they wanted in. Smash cut to 2023, and I think it's pretty clear that things have not worked out for ABI the way they want them to, the way they hoped that they would. Their breweries are, these craft breweries are mostly not having success. There are a few bright spots, certainly in terms of, especially like individual SKUs. If you look at, there's growth opportunities, but the breweries overall are not doing great.
Hmm.
People, ABI has wound down all of those experiments or gotten itself out of all of those, sort of ancillary businesses that I was talking about for the most part.
Yeah.
And uh, like everyone else in the craft brewing segment, ABI's craft breweries are struggling to attract and, just as importantly, more importantly, retain drinkers who are increasingly enthralled by, spirits based canned cocktails and just spirits generally. Like that's where all of the drinker attention is right now. And they have not figured out a great answer for that. The difference between ABI's craft breweries and the 9,700 other craft breweries that operate is ABI has a ton of money. Like if anyone should be able to navigate these waters, it should be them. They have no real excuse that they lack scale, that they lack expertise, that they lack connections, because those are all the things that they pitched themselves to those breweries that went out and acquired. That's all the stuff they pitched to them is like, hey, with us, you'll be able to do X, Y, and Z. You'll be able to get distribution. You'll be able to do innovative stuff. You'll be able to steer the market forward. I think it's pretty clear that that has not come to fruition. And I think that the fact that Tilray is able to move in, ABI says they approach them. The fact that Tilray is able to get ABI on the phone and say, hey man, like what do you want to, what can you put on the block for us? Because we're interested in making a cash offer, which it was. You don't do that with successful businesses.
Hmm. I think that's really interesting. I mean, the ABI is being very transparent with its actions here, right? They're not trying to, it doesn't sound like they're trying to frame this as something that it's not. And you mentioned earlier the fact that, they remain, or they say they remain committed to the remaining brands in their portfolio. But as I know you have written about, if I worked for one of those, I'd be starting to feel a little bit worried. I hope that that's not the case. You know what I mean? But that future certainly doesn't seem certain. But maybe this comes back to perceptions again here too, right? So on the one hand, it sounds like ABI is very transparently saying here, we no longer believe in craft, or we're kind of done with this little fun project that we had. We're bored. We're moving on to the next thing.
Right.
And then on the other hand, I got something here that I got to ask you about. So there's a quote linked to this deal, and it's the Tilray CEO, whose name I'm looking at here, Irwin Simon, not to be confused with Simon Irwin, two different people. And that mistake can
Unbeknownst to
easily be
me,
made.
yeah.
But Irwin Simon says he told investors last month, craft beer is cool and will become cooler. If we take him at are we to take him at face value here, Dave? Do we believe what he's saying? Does he believe what he's saying, or is he maybe partaking in some of the other stuff they produce over there at Tilray?
Yeah, getting high on his own supply. I mean, look, it's always a potential, of course, not to cast aspersions on Mr. Simon, but that's a temptation as old as time. I think when I saw that quote, it was I think it came out July 27th, and it was in, I think they're like the close of their fiscal year. It was in a presentation to analysts over how the company is doing, an earnings report or something along these lines. And it stuck out to me because that is just not that does not comport with all of my reporting on what craft beer is to the American drinking public in 2023 and 2022 and 2021. For the last 5 years or so, craft brewing has seen its cultural cachet, talking about coolness, has seen like its cultural cachet erode as a new generation of drinkers comes online, right? You start to see Gen Z drinkers not only hitting legal drinking age, because of course, Tim, no one drinks until they turn 21, as you know. Here on Taplines, we strictly adhere to all federal drinking rules and regulations. As Gen Z drinkers started to come online, certainly like they started shaping preferences, but Gen Z had already at that point started dictating culture. Even before, they really started drinking at volume. This is the nature of, cultural cycles. Like at some point you're no longer a kid anymore, and you realize like they're listening to different music, they're wearing different clothes, you're washed up, you're old. That's really kind of how craft brewing, started to find itself at the close of last decade and into this one. Is that it was no longer the new kid on the block. It no longer had a novel and intriguing value proposition, so to speak, with drinkers who were taken in by its anti-corporate, us versus them, David and Goliath, facade and its full flavored beers. So they had to adjust. They have struggled to adjust. I think, I'm saying they as the industry. Of course, individual breweries within it have had varying levels of success. Some have done quite well. But I think as the industry as a whole has not really aged particularly gracefully, especially not like in terms of its cultural footprint here in the US. And so you hear Simon say that, or I read the quote that he said, and I'm just like, man, this guy either is a visionary and has an angle on the industry that I simply don't, which is possible. I mean, I'm not, I'm the president. I don't know everything. I get stuff wrong. Taplines listener, I know that's hard to believe, but it's true. It's true, and we must call it out as such. But I think the question is, okay, if he's serious about this, and this is not just him sort of gassing up investors because now they have a stake in craft brewing. And July 27th, they had yet to announce this deal. But in hindsight, I think you have to read that as him priming the pump to get analysts excited about this deal when it breaks, right? I think if that's really what he thinks, then he is seeing a different side of the industry than many, many other craft breweries are. And I think it's worth figuring out or discussing at least what that view looks like from the Tilray captain's chair, because right now, I just as we're recording this, just a few hours prior, I was in a presentation from the Brewers Association's chief economist, Bart Watson. Has not been on Taplines yet, but someday, Bart, we will have you on. We look forward to having you in your future state. And Bart's mid-year review for 2023 is that craft brewing as a segment is between 2 and 4% down, depending on how you slice it. So again, this is not a nosedive, but it's also does that say cool and getting cooler to you? Because it certainly doesn't to me, man.
No, but Simon says, so we should listen to what Simon says here today on Taplines.
Yeah, Simon says pass the joint. Yeah.
ABI is getting out. Tilray's getting in. If you're Irwin Simon right now, Dave, you're sat there, you're looking over this new portfolio of beer brands, craft brewers that you bought. What are you most excited about? What do you feel like? Where do you think he sees the biggest opportunity here? Because or maybe you can just reel off for us first of all here, like who are the names there, or the important names to know, and then out of those, maybe tell us what you're thinking he's most excited about right now and where the opportunity is.
The brands that got acquired, there were 7 beer brands / breweries, that had whatever. This will be clear in a second, the reason I'm making this distinction. So we had Breckenridge Brewery, we had Blue Point Brewing Company in Long Island, 10 Barrel, which is in Bend, Oregon, Red Hook, which is in Seattle, Widmer is in Portland, and Square Mile Cider Company, which is also, I believe, in Portland. And then there was also included in the deal was an erstwhile energy drink brand, a non-alcoholic energy drink brand that ABI acquired in 2019, and just, I don't know if they threw it in as like a deal sweetener or what. It's called Highball. They gave up on it. They had bought it in 2019 and they just straight up discontinued it in May 2023. So like they had already been like, cool, this thing is bad. We are no longer going to do it as a business. And then it shows up in this Tilray deal. Uh,
how does that even work? A brand no longer
don't
exists, but it's
know.
part of the deal? I don't know. That's kind of
Yeah.
a weird caveat or
I
weird
mean,
kind of asterisk.
AVI, of course, owns the intellectual property, owns the formula, owns the label, the
That's
trademarks,
fair enough. Yeah.
all that good shit. And I would assume it actually kind of begs the question of like what else is in their like vast portfolio of like failed acquisitions and like internal house brands that that could be for sale, or that like is just in a graveyard buried somewhere on the outskirts of St. Louis, of all these things that could be resurrected at any time if they ever need a bunch of quick cash and they can find a buyer for them. But that actually segues nicely into the last brand that's involved in this deal, which is Shock Top,
I'm
man.
going to hold you there for a second. Shock Top?
Shock Top, I say.
I'm glad you said it, Dave. Because I've got one here for the show for myself.
I can't believe you brought this, dude.
I'm sorry, yeah, and for the listeners here and the non-viewers of the show, I bought myself a Shock Top because this is news to me. Of course, I've maybe seen Shock Top in bodegas, right? I've seen the bottles before. I've never tasted it. I'm about to taste my first here.
Oh, you never
as
had
I
it?
enjoy. I've never had Shock Top in my life.
Wow, we're making history. Normally, we talk about history on here on the Taplines podcast. Today on the Vine Pair Podcast Network, we are making history.
You're
Vine
making
Pair,
history.
Vine Pair managing editor Tim McCurdy. He of a excellent palate, a trained palate, who normally dabbles in spirits-based drinks. He's a martini expert, but he goes the distance. He has the range, and today he will be tasting. You got a long neck of Shock Top there, buddy. Yeah, go ahead, take a sip.
Cheers. And I will say this just before I do take that sip. Look, I got ahead. I went and bought this beer because I've read your excellent coverage of this, both on VinePair and your column in Hop Take, but also on your newsletter Fingers. So I knew probably the conversation today was going to veer in the direction of Shock Top. So I had that little spoiler alert, and that's why I've got one. So cheers, Dave. Thank you for inspiring my drinking choice today.
I'm just sorry it led to Shock Top of all things, but cheers. And what are your initial impressions?
I'm with Erwin on this one.
You see a future.
I see a future. Cool and getting cooler. No, I mean,
tell our listeners what. Many listeners probably have never tasted a Shock Top. What does it taste like?
Yeah, I mean, as it says on the front of the label here, Belgian white. I would say that it's kind of mild on that front for that style, at least in my limited experience. But yeah, it probably also. Well, actually, no. I was going to say the power of suggestion here. There's a bright orange label on it. There's an orange with a mohawk.
Little dude, yeah,
little dude, and yeah, there is a hint of orange, but I don't think it's like cloyingly like creamsicle orange or anything. But I don't know. I mean, look, would I be reaching for this on a normal basis? Absolutely not. But am I going to drink it as we're chatting through the episode? Hell yeah.
Godspeed to you. What I want to know is where that little dude was on January 6th is what I want to know. It's like, what was he up to? Let's check the social media.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So Shock Top is a part of this deal. It's also now a part of your long and illustrious drinking career, for better or worse. Shock Top gets thrown into the deal with Tilray, that ABI puts together. And like I said a little earlier, this deal is for about $85 million, all cash that Tilray is paying for. This is not a lot of money for even one national beer brand, let alone 8, right? I did the quick back of the napkin math, assuming they're all the same amount of money, and we're all valued equally in the deal, which they almost certainly weren't, but we don't have any clarity into, what the line by line breakdown was of the sum total. If you just divide $85 million by 8, you get something like $10.6 million per brand. I mean, this is just a very, very cheap deal for Tilray, right? And it's particularly cheap. Yeah, it's crazy, man. To put that in context, Monster bought Canarchy in 2022 with, a year and a half ago, because it was early 2022. They bought Canarchy for like $330 million for a roughly comparable number of brands. Another point of context that Taplines listeners will surely be familiar with, given it's been quite high profile over the course of summer 2023, is Anchor Brewing Company was acquired by Sapporo USA, just one brewery, for $85 million in
Wow.
that same amount in 2017. And so obviously these are not apples to apples or oranges to oranges in the case of Shock Top, but you are looking at just a dramatically lower, sort of valuation on a per barrel price. And Shock Top is a really good example of that type of sort of bargain basement value that Tilray appears to have gotten, because as much of a joke as it is, and I mock it, and I think a lot of other people who are more into beer look down their noses at it. It's certainly not a beer that's going to win awards or win sort of accolades, traction with the vanguard of America's beer drinkers, but it sells a lot. It's doing like you're looking at several 100,000 barrels a year still, even though it's been
Wow.
on the yeah, I know, it's a huge brand, dude. Like, even though it's been on the decline since 2017 and is losing like tons of tons of traction in the marketplace, its sales are not great. Brewbound, our pals at Brewbound, reported on the when this sale broke, they did a little breakdown of recent scan data pertaining to Shock Top's performance in the market. In its top three SKUs, like the original, which is, I think, that's what you're drinking, and then they have twisted pretzel wheat, and then they
Sorry?
have, yeah, that's right. Don't. There's nothing I can say to you that's going to make it any easier for you to understand. So let's just move on. It's twisted
Okay.
pretzel wheat. Don't ask any more questions. It's better to just not. And then there's a canned product that they rolled out called Zest Squeeze the Day. That is sort of their answer to, or their attempted answer to, Blue Moon's Light Sky product, which is a lighter, sort of hard seltzer adjacent beer that actually performs well. Light Sky performs really well. Zest Squeeze the Day, perhaps because of the stupidest fucking name in the beer business, does not. But those three brands, the original Twisted Pretzel Wheat, and then Zest Squeeze the Day, those are down anywhere between 14% and 95% in terms of
95% down?
95% down in volume, according to Nielsen scan data analyzed by off-premise scan data analyzed by our pals at Brewbound. So we're talking about I mean, that's a free fall, right? Like, and that Zest Squeeze of the Day, I think, has just struggled a lot. That's
Right.
year to date compared to the trailing 52-week period. And I think it was introduced in 2022, so it's always going to get a bigger lift. And then when it comes around to lap, it looks terrible. But the point
Got
here, I don't want to get too in the weeds. I know I already am. The point here is that we are not looking at a particularly beloved brand. I mean, the American drinking public is clearly not reacting with enthusiasm for these products, but it's huge. And so the fact that Tilray, which has a relatively small foothold in the American beer business overall, even with this acquisition, compare it to Molson Coors or Anheuser-Busch or even Boston Beer Company, it's nowhere near the barrelage, right? Like, the fact that they're able to get a hold of a brand that size and get all of the access to all of those distributors that carry Shock Top, the accounts that carry Shock Top, the brand name and the brand equity, there's a case to be made there that at the right price, there's still value there.
Mm-hmm. And, got a little two-parter here for you, Dave. First part of that being, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that in some of your coverage, I read that maybe Shock Top started or was created as maybe a competitor to Blue Moon, or
Yes.
maybe try and lure in some of those Blue Moon drinkers. More recently, I think a trend in all of beverage alcohol is flavors. But in beer specifically, some of the biggest product releases we've seen in recent years have been unabashedly or unashamedly like flavored releases juice bomb kind of
Right.
things, right? Is there maybe part of Tilray or Irwin and his team? Is there maybe a part of them right now that's thinking, with the right marketing, we know this style of beer is working well. Can we capture some of those drinkers who are basically like propping up beer sales right now, right? Like without those people, without those dollars going to those styles of beers, maybe the craft beer market or the beer market looks a lot worse. Craft beer market looks a
Yep.
lot worse than it does right now. Like, do you think that's part of it, or are they just saying like, look, there can be more Blue Moon / Shock Top style drinkers out there, and we just need to position this right? Like, where do you think the thinking is there?
I think it's two things. The first thing, and I think the governing principle of this acquisition, at least where the value is for Tilray, the primary value, is the additional footprint that it gains immediately in the U.S. market geographically. One of the Simon presented a PowerPoint deck to analysts in the aftermath of announcing the deal, that one of the slides has the classic like map of the US laid out, overlaid with Tilray's new and existing brewing assets, and you can see the geographic sort of strategy take shape. They're strong in the Pacific Northwest. They're strong in, they have some strength in California. They're very strong in Florida and the Northeast. These are all big, brewing, big beer drinking states. And the business that Tilray is in and wants to be in and already has demonstrated, some success with, is combining these, buying up brands, combining their production, combining their sales force, combining their back office and whatever. They're purchasing all the stuff, all those synergies that we were joking about earlier, and leveraging those to deliver not only top line growth but also bottom line growth, right? So if you can grow the top line by selling more beer, but you get less efficient at doing it, then your bottom line doesn't grow, and that's bad because that's your take home. If you can grow one, you would ideally want to grow the bottom line, and you see that done, most infamously in the industry. Anheuser-Busch InBev itself, right when InBev took over in 2008, they became notorious. The Brazilian executives that took over became notorious for just slashing to the bone everything having to do with the company's operations. So you can grow bottom line, like that as well, right? You just you stop doing all the shit you were spending money on, and you continue making, you continue selling more or less the same amount of beer. The bottom line is going to grow. Now you can only cut once, is the wisdom in the industry. Like once something's gone, it's gone, and then where are you going to get the growth next year? So ideally, you want to get top line and bottom line growth. That's not a beer industry thing. That's just a business thing. Tilray is clearly looking at both top and bottom line opportunities, but I think the bottom line opportunity is probably the one that's motivating this deal the very most. Is this opportunity to consolidate, operations, to brew, find sort of like simpatico relationships between the breweries in their existing portfolio and then the ones they're going to add. For example, Blue Point is in Patchogue, Rhode Island, and Montauk Brewing is just 30 miles east of that. Montauk needs capacity. Blue Point has capacity. So all of a sudden they've backed themselves into a nice, sort of symbiotic relationship between two breweries that they're going to own. Right. And so they don't have to go out and give away margin to contract out like Montauk's additional capacity. Right. That's an attractive win there. And so I think they're thinking like that. The Shock Top thing, though, I think you're right on. And I think that I kind of love this idea because as much as I am not going to drink Shock Top, like I don't drink any of the stuff that is the best seller with American, drinkers. Like that's, Like this is more on your side of the beer, wine, spirits divide than mine, but like look at all the popular shit in spirits right now just demonstrates like a very childlike American palate. Like Screwball, for example, just so like big time.
100%.
There was a tie up with Old Smoky and Tanteo tequila, which is like infused tequilas and like moonshine that's flavored like apple pie. Like these are not things that I drink. That's a personal preference, but you can look at the number of cases that they're moving, and you know that people are drinking them. People are buying them and people
For
are
sure.
drinking them. In the beer business, it's no different, right? Like you referenced before, these fruity, these hazy IPAs, which are basically, again, looking at Bart Watson's fresh data from the Brewers Association mid-year through 2023, some of the only like real growth right now in the beer industry, in the craft beer industry, the segment is coming from double and triple hazy IPAs and double and triple imperial IPAs, and by that we mean more or less the Juice Forces and the Fruit Forces
Exactly.
of the world, the Voodoo Ranger products, and their ilk, right? Other similar like products from other producers. So that stuff is what's working with the American drinking public, and we've seen both legacy brewers and younger, more agile ones push into that space in their way, right? So like New Belgium is looking at a hard juice right now, like a literal hard juice. I haven't tasted it yet, but like that's how they're describing it. Dogfish Head is pushing Golden Squall, I think it's called Citrus Squall, excuse me, which is like a fruited golden ale. I think New Belgium also has like another like very fruited beer. Whatever. The point is that like this is where the American palate is right now. It is coming out of its sort of hard seltzer heyday. It is looking for more like fuller, still super accessible flavors, but like still like fuller, juicier, sweeter flavors. And Shock Top isn't that far away from what we're describing here. I think Shock Top, I kind of love the move. I kind of think that Shock Top makes sense for this. I think the biggest problem with this, Tim, is that like it was always trying to be Blue Moon, and it just isn't. You can't be something that you're not,
Yeah.
right? And they were late to the party. Blue Moon hits in 1995. Shock Top rolls out in 2006, a full decade, more than a decade later. The American drinking public, for all its sort of shortcomings, they hate a loser. They hate a Johnny Come Lately. They hate a second fiddle.
Yeah.
No one wants to be drinking the second best thing, the copy of the thing. Like you just drink the thing, just drink
Pepsi.
Blue Moon, right? I think Tilray, if they're going to be successful with Shock Top and reposition it for this juicy future we have, is to just divest any trappings of like craft and Blue Moon, reposition entirely. It's not a craft beer. Real craft heads don't fucking want it. And everyone who you want to sell it to in the mainstream doesn't want craft beer. It doesn't, so get rid of that entirely. Give the people what they want. Give us that sweet, that funk, that I forget the rest of there. You know where I'm going with that.
But I love that. I love where we're heading with this. I love, the direction we're going here. Follow-up question for you about the just Americans hating losers, right? It's a very good way to put it, right? No one wants the second fiddle, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's like, but I've personally been in this country 6 years now, and I was not very aware of Shock Top's existence at all, right? So maybe I arrived too late. But what I'm saying here is like that demographic of drinkers too that is opting for kind of like these juicy, beers, that don't really resemble beers at all, right? Like that mainstream public that are buying those things. How familiar do you think they are also with Shock Top and Shock Top's positioning? Or is this almost like that it can come out, maybe not come out of the gates as like a new brand, but come out of the gates with people just like not really associating it with anything, right? Because like you cover this stuff a lot, and you're very nostalgic when it comes to your analysis of things too. As we've seen in the Tea Party episode, which I love very much, by the
Oh,
way. I want to
shout out to
say,
Andy Nathan. Oh, Taplines listener, if you haven't heard that one, go listen to the Tea Party episode with Andy Nathan. It's a treat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so I'm wondering there, do you know, like what association does America have with this brand? And do you think that it kind of maybe does get a bit of a clean slate, especially if it comes up with some interesting marketing campaign around it, right? Like, is that a genuine possibility, or am I just getting a little too excited like our friend Simon there?
I think you're probably I think you're right on. I think that that's the opportunity as it pertains to Shock Top is for Tilray is let's take advantage of the scale, let's take advantage of the footprint, and the distributor relationships, the retail relationships, and let's start thinking about what we can do to make this brand, really sort of live up to that considerable footprint that it still has. It never really earned that in the way that an independent brand would have to, because every step of the way it's an ABI brand from creation all the way to sale. So now the question is, what can Tilray do to clean it up, to make it look cooler, to to get the stank of corporate ABI sort of reverse engineering off of it and turn it into something that people actually want to drink. I do think that it is basically a clean slate. I mean, if there are like, true Shock Top heads out there, like the real OG diehard fans, I don't know them. I've never met them. Have you ever met someone who's like, what I want is a Shock Top? Like, it's not a brand that has that type of cachet, even in the way Blue Moon does. Blue Moon has far more, sort of sway with consumers. So I think that blank, that sort of irrelevance could actually work in its favor here, because I do think that gives Tilray runway to redevelop the brand in a way that fits in with this new strategy that they're going to be pursuing.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, we're devoting a lot of time here to Shock Top because it is
as we should,
just making sure because it is a really fascinating and interesting one. It's a funny reminder. But what are some of the other brands in this acquisition that really stand out to you, or offer a couple of things for us to explore and chat about today as well?
I think the other big stories that I'm going to be looking at as Tilray, closes on this deal. The deal's still not closed, but these things normally will go through. There's not really going to be antitrust concerns. Tilray is not big enough for that. It's hard for me to see why this would get blown up unless there's something, about the deal that hasn't come to light yet. So let's assume that it goes through, right? The storylines that I'm going to be watching, aside from Shock Top's like potential resurrection, there's a few. One is the potential restoration of Red Hook Brewery, which is Pacific Northwest OG brewery. They've been around, I think, since '94. Red Hook was one of the original sort of micro breweries they were known of at the time, that first sort of concerned Anheuser-Busch executives way back in '96. This is before InBev, of course, by a long shot. They're like, oh man, we need to take this seriously. There's something going on in the Pacific Northwest that we really don't have an answer to. One of those beers was Red Hook. So Red Hook has its Big Ballard, I think, is their biggest SKU. It's an Imperial IPA. I want to say maybe a double. And that'll be interesting to see how that brand sort of fares under Tilray. They never really got, Red Hook never really got the greatest look from ABI once they took over, because it was in the Craft Brewers Alliance, the CBA, that ABI had a stake in, but only purchased fully a couple of years ago. So it always had this weird relationship with Anheuser-Busch. And I think that really worked to Red Hook's detriment in terms of, it had an opportunity to become a national or at least, seriously regional brand. And I think it maybe, underperformed there. So that's one thing that I want to see how they handle that. Another is Widmer Brothers, which is an iconic Portland brewery that, they're as much a pioneer, if not more, than Red Hook. It was started by two brothers in Oregon, and for a while was really just hot shit. They had a Hefeweizen that I think introduced a lot of people to a lot of American drinkers to that. The concept of wheat beers generally, right? Especially on the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest. Widmer is interesting for a couple different reasons. One, there's been some. They closed their on-premise tap room pub a couple years ago, I think, very suddenly, and ABI never really gave an answer for what was going on there. I know locals like Jeff Allworth, who runs the Beervana blog, has been taking a close look at what's going on there, because it just apparently was a big people really liked it, and they just kind of closed it and have never since reopened it. So there's some sort of community aspects to it that'll be interesting to see if Tilray leans into that. I mean, that is where growth is coming from in craft brewing right now. Is tap rooms, is owned and operated on premise. That is the growth, not packaged, certainly not draft. So it'll be interesting to see if Tilray leans into stuff like that. I'm also interested to see at Widmer what they do about the union that is formed at Widmer and is currently in bargaining with the company for its first contract. There's I'm going to say 54 or so workers at Widmer that are bargaining with the local Teamsters unit in order to be collectively represented and have a union contract. There's typically continuity in situations like this, but I'm not exactly sure how it works. So that'll be interesting to see. I just the other day wrote a story about how I believe, and I still do, I stand by it, that unionizing Anheuser-Busch's craft brewing portfolio is a path forward for the labor movement in the craft brewing industry, because it creates a template that can be duplicated at other similar businesses, because it it makes it harder to ignore the pay disparities between craft breweries and macro breweries, which are typically union and therefore have better wages and better benefits and things like that. Now ABI's craft portfolio is a little smaller because it got rid of 8 brands. But the question remains of sort of what does the labor movement look like at Widmer moving forward under Tilray's leadership, and that I'm not sure about. I have an email out with the Teamster local there. Again, they're in bargaining. They're in motion. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Those are things to watch for sure. Another thing that I want to flag with you, because I think listeners, and of course you, Tim, should give a little bit of a better sense for how much of a oddball deal this is, or oddball's not a maverick deal, a contrarian deal is probably a better way to put it. Erwin Simon interviewed with Brewbound, with Justin Kendall over at Brewbound the other day. And one other thing, it's an interesting interview. And if you're a subscriber over at Brewbound, I recommend it. It's a great trade publication. But one of the things that he said was basically this is not a direct quote, but they had already acquired Breckenridge Distillery in, I don't know, 2021 or maybe early 2022. And basically everyone just kept on getting confused and thought that they owned Breckenridge Brewery, which is a totally unrelated business. It's just not the same business. So again, I'm not quoting here, but I'm paraphrasing, but he's basically, yeah. So like we just kind of started looking at that business because like everyone kept on asking us if we were like the Breckenridge Brewery. It's like, did you just buy this brewery? Like, because it would be like less annoying to deal with emails if you just owned both of them, like both the brewery and the distillery. Like,
Wow.
yeah. So I think like I don't want to say that to claim that there's no logic behind it and that there's no thesis behind it. Truthfully, I think the thesis is decently strong, especially given the fire sale price that Tilray got. They don't have to
Mhm.
they don't have to do much right to make it worth it in a way that ABI had to do everything right to try to make it worth it to keep these brands. But I did think that was funny, and I did think it was just like a weird way to look at it. Like, oh, well, it has the same name. Why don't we just buy it? Like,
I love that. I love as well some of the parts of the conversations we've had today have been like, you look at a headline, right? Tilray acquires 8 brands from Anheuser-Busch, and you're like, all right, that's a fairly bland, or it could be a very bland tale, right? Just eight different things in a
Right.
portfolio. And then you start to break it down like this, and you're like, yeah, it is big business. Are people at the top, are these people crazy? Or, is there a lot of logic to this? Is there more to it than we're seeing? And I guess I want to get your thoughts here on the record, Dave. I want you to lay down your verdict here and say that just as now we can look back and chuckle, not chuckle, but we can think how crazy it was, for example, for Anheuser-Busch to launch a craft beer publication, back in the day. Like that was ever, both of us being in media here, like that was ever going to make a lot of money for anyone.
Yeah.
So now looking back, if you were to look back in 10 years' time, does this end up being oddball decision, but ultimately, maybe not the biggest deal in the world? Because, we are talking 85 million, not massive sums in the history of craft beer acquisitions, as you've told us.
Right.
Or is this maybe a stroke of genius? Are we looking at the beer equivalent of, and I hope you'll stick with me here, like a Moneyball situation, where I love that movie, and Billy Bean taking these things and acquire them and being like, you know what, there's unseen potential in these brands, and actually, if we can make it work, or if we can make each of them work just a little bit, this is going to be great. Dave, you're going on the record now. What's the decision?
Oh man, you can hold me to it. 10 years from now, you're gonna get me on the phone and be like, I told you, motherfucker. It's a great question. Moneyball, I think, is a great frame to look at the optimistic case for Tilray's acquisitions here being a stroke of genius. I think that, you look at where value, everyone is of course looking to grow, but you're also looking to find value in assets that already exist, right? And this is very like cold, calculated, like business, sort of terminology that I think repulses, or at least repulsed, a lot of the, craft brewing intelligentsia, so to speak, over the course of the past decade. But the industry has moved well past that at this point, and there's no love lost or no sort of illusions that something like Blue Point Brewing Company is artisanal and farm to table and all that good shit. Like that is past. That milieu is dissolved, especially around these breweries. I think there's value in these assets. We talked about just, Shock Top is kind of the best example of it, but like you look at what the actual deal is and what Shock Top has to offer a brand like Tilray, and you can start to see, even though the shock value, no pun intended, of saying that brand A still exists and B, someone paid money for it in 2023, that's funny, and I stand by it. Like that's crazy. I think that's nuts. But it's nuts in a way that is bold and certainly has risk, but is not without logic. Like there's a logic there. I like the move. I think that the question is whether Tilray can execute in a way that is going to allow it to unlock the benefit of that scale, to get those synergies that it tells investors it's going to be able to get. I don't know a ton about the way this company operates or whether it's had success, doing that in the past in other aspects of its business. Its early gains in craft brewing, though, since acquiring Sweetwater, are promising. Its alcohol division, which is all just the American craft beer breweries that it owns, it's up something like 30% in the close of the last fiscal year. They're seeing it contribute about 15% to its already. That division is contributing about 15% to its overall revenues, which is, this is significant. It's not the biggest company in the world, but it's like I said, market cap of $2 billion with a B. Like 15% of revenues for that type of company is not nothing, right? It's about $95 million. So they're having some success there. And if they can continue doing that, put it on the record. I think that's the if, right? Is if they execute the way they have with the brands that they already got. I see no reason that this is an albatross around Tilray's neck. I think there's a good case to be made that there's some Moneyball being played here, and I would be shocked if this was the sort of thing that sank the company or that even turned out to be a mistake down the line because of all of the doors that it opens with the distributors and the retail accounts. And again, I just keep coming back to the price, man. Like, it's just not that dangerous. They paid for it in all cash. They didn't even have to lever up to make this acquisition. Like, this is there's only so many things that can go wrong when you don't pay, $1 billion like Constellation did for Ballast Point infamously did in 2015. I think they're going to be fine here. I like the move. I think it's, if the question is crazy or crazy like a fox, I think it's crazy like a fox here. I like the risk appetite, and I think it could really pan out for him. So if I'm wrong, no one is allowed to tell me I told you so. 10 years
everyone will have forgotten about Chalk Top again in 10 years' time.
That's right. And then you and I will buy it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We will give you $7,500 for it.
We didn't get into it much as well, but I'm interested to see what happens with the energy drink too, whether that becomes revived, because if they didn't have any plans for it, right? Like, why would Tilray be like, yeah, stick that in the bag as well? We might as well.
The working theory there. Yeah. Good. The question is like whether this was like a make good to just get this deal over the line, or they have like serious designs on it. My suspicion, Tilray has several SKUs, even in the US and certainly in Canada, of non-alcoholic THC infused beverage. So it seems like a good guess, at least, that they may see an opportunity there. But it's not clear because they just don't have much. They don't have any track record in the U.S. of operating this type of brand, and I'm not sure what they're up to there. But we'll see, man.
We'll see. Well, Dave, I've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed this crossover episode, this turning the tables. I'm walking out of this feeling a lot clearer, just in my understanding of the deal. So thank you very much for that, man.
Thank you for joining us. Tim McCurdy, Cocktail College. Everyone go check out Cocktail College also on the VinePair Podcast Network. He's my podcast brother from another podcast mother. It's a fantastic show that covers, every aspect of every drink that you've ever heard of and many that you haven't, in a way that is not thuddingly boring like most cocktail podcasts are. It's actually quite fantastic, and he's got some of the best guests in the business on there. I can't recommend it enough. If you like Taplines, you'll love Cocktail College, probably for other reasons, but whatever. We'll take your love in whatever form it comes in. Tim, thanks for joining Taplines. It's always a pleasure, my friend. I'll see you again soon.
Dave, pleasure is mine. Cheers.
Enjoy the shop top. Taplines is recorded in Richmond, Virginia, and produced by yours truly and Darby Seaside, who, along with the talented Shane Farrick, composed our delightful soundtrack. Just listen to it. I also want to give a quick shout out to the entire VinePair team, and especially co-founders Adam Teeter and Josh Mallon, editor-in-chief Joanna Sciarrino, managing editor Tim McCurdy, and art director Danielle Grinberg, who designed our lovely Taplines logo. And of course, a big thank you to you, yes, you listener, for spending time with us week in and week out. We literally couldn't do this without you. I'm Dave Infante, and I'll catch you next time.